Despite the ANC's public defiance of the United States of America, behind closed doors, they know what is coming. America is preparing crippling sanctions against South Africa. And the next likely step, according to our own finance minister, would be to cut South Africa off from global payments. Finance Minister Godongwana rushed into an emergency meeting with the banks and told top executives to prepare for the unthinkable: expulsion from the global SWIFT system, something that could cripple our economy overnight. In this meeting, Godongwana deliberated with executives from the top South African commercial banks at the annual board session of the Banking Association of South Africa. Breaking away from the routine discussions on regulations, banking stability, and fiscal policy these annual meetings are known for, the discussions were dominated by one topic and one topic alone: the looming threat of United States sanctions against South Africa and the ever-increasing heat the ANC had caused to come from the Trump administration. More specifically, a proposed law in Washington, the US-South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act, introduced by Republican Congressman Ronnie Jackson, created massive concerns for banking executives. This law, as we discussed on this channel, calls for the complete reassessment of diplomatic relations with a devastating knock-on effect: sanctions directly targeting ANC leaders and senior government officials, many of whom are shareholders and top executives within our commercial banks themselves. The most alarming consequence raised in the meeting was that if this bill is passed through Congress in America, South Africa would be cut off from the SWIFT international payment system. To understand the gravity of this, we must look at where it also happened. When Russia was hit with sanctions after invading Ukraine, its exclusion from SWIFT crippled its ability to make international financial transfers. For South Africa, already battling economic stagnation, the impact would be catastrophic, affecting everything from importing goods to fuel to paying international debts, and hitting the private sector hard, as it will make imports from any other country significantly more difficult and significantly more expensive. Furthermore, the South African government has done virtually nothing thus far to engage with American counterparts to diffuse tensions and prevent this worst-case scenario. At the same time, local banks have been urged by the South African government to double down on their compliance and risk management system as a safeguard should sanctions materialize, an outcome the government now views as imminent behind closed doors, just not knowing when to expect the next punch in the liver from the United States of America. On the other hand, in public, the ANC's leadership is still signaling defiance to the masses. Secretary General Fikile Mbalula insisted that the government will not abandon its project of so-called transformation and redressing colonial-era inequalities, even if this results in sanctions against senior ANC officials. After the United States called for an end to South Africa's extreme racial prejudice and discriminatory laws.
Not this ANC, not this leadership. If they want to bring sanctions on us, let them bring them. But this country, South Africa, all its citizens know that it is a democratic country, it's a liberated country, and we are still transforming this country in order to achieve equity. And we will still pursue redress because we are not equal in this economy. This economy is still male, white dominated. And you want to tell us to abandon policies that seek to advance transformation.
The Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, or SWIFT, is a global messaging network that has been used by banks and financial institutions to securely transmit information about financial transactions since back in 1973. SWIFT is not an international central bank, but rather a communication system designed to standardize and facilitate cross-border payments between different countries with different banking systems. SWIFT is so vital to international finance that without it, participation in the modern global economy becomes virtually impossible. Without SWIFT, banks must rely on slower, less secure, and less trusted alternatives such as fax, phone, or bilateral agreements. This hampers international trade massively, and it complicates currency exchange and significantly increases the cost of doing business internationally. SWIFT is globally recognized as a reliable system, which means that foreign investors and companies are generally hesitant to engage in any cross-border transactions without SWIFT. If a country were to be cut off from SWIFT, like Russia, this immediately signals to the entire financial world that this country is now a no-go zone for investors, cut off from the rest of the global economy. And this is exactly what happened to Russia when it was sanctioned following the initiation of the Ukraine war in 2022, when several of its major banks were cut off from the system and denied access to global commerce. Because SWIFT is based in Belgium and subject to EU law, Western nations such as the United States and the EU are able to leverage it as an instrument of financial warfare. The impact of the financial isolation was immediate. Russian banks found it far more difficult to process international payments, particularly in euros and dollars. This complicated both imports and exports, including energy sales, which are the backbone of Russia's economy. Furthermore, international investors who had shares in Russian companies ended up losing it as they became completely unable to cash out on their investments. So, while being cut off from SWIFT doesn't make participation in the global economy impossible, it does severely complicate things, isolating a country and, of course, leading to a large-scale withdrawal of international investment. By the way, if you find our work informative, receive free updates on WhatsApp from us by following these steps right here. If being cut off from SWIFT was a punch that severely injured a major power like Russia, it has the potential to kill a much smaller economy like South Africa. After all, Russia is an energy superpower, a petrostate with massive oil and gas reserves that the world still desperately needs, especially Europe. Even after being cut off from SWIFT, Europe and Asia could not simply unplug from Russian oil and gas without plunging their own economies into absolute chaos. Because of its tremendous resources, Russia has always had and continues to have a certain amount of leverage over particularly northern European nations who remain dependent upon Russia to survive their own cold winters. South Africa has none of that. No war chest, no energy weapon to hold against the throat of the West, no global dependency that would force the world to keep trading with us, even if sanctions fell like a hammer. We are not the world's gas station. We are a minor, tiny economy, limping along with meager growth, plagued by rolling blackouts, massive corruption, and a decaying industrial base. If Russia could scramble together lifelines through China and India and alternative financial systems, South Africa, on the other hand, would be left completely stranded. In fact, as the Willem Petzer group pointed out in a recent video, which you can view by clicking right here, not a single BRICS country has come out in support of South Africa in the midst of its feud with the United States. Whereas in Russia, the pain of SWIFT sanctions was softened by its sheer size, its military power, and its indispensable resources. South Africa, if cut off from SWIFT, would face total financial suffocation. Unlike Russia, South Africa has no strategic cushion, no alternative markets powerful enough to throw us a lifeline, and no investment, no foreign capital, no global trade at the scale that Russia did have. Do you like our content? Make this channel stronger by becoming a member of the Willem Petzer group. Just follow these steps right here to support us. I still feel like many South Africans still fail to realize the full impact of what South Africa's trade war with the United States and the international pressure that has been mounted on this country over the past 7 months truly entails. We are not talking about a few inconveniences at the petrol pump or slightly higher import costs. We are talking about an economic doomsday scenario if things continue to escalate. If we end up being cut off from SWIFT, like the minister seems to think we are going to be, the imports of major necessities such as medicine and machinery could almost grind to a halt. The rand could plummet, inflation could skyrocket. Imagine hospitals unable to bring in critical medicines. Imagine Eskom unable to source parts to keep its already crumbling infrastructure running. Imagine supermarkets forced to push up food prices week after week after week because imported goods are strangled by sanctions. This is the only logical outcome of the path the ANC has chosen. Public defiance to score political points, while in private they scramble, terrified, knowing they have led us to the edge of a cliff. If America pulls the SWIFT trigger, it will not simply be a blow to the ANC, it could be a dagger in the heart of the South African economy as a whole. Because make no mistake, if we continue to allow this ANC government to keep gambling with our future, we will wake up one morning in a country where the shelves are empty, the lights are off, and the rand in our pocket isn't worth the paper it is printed on. As we pointed out in a recent video, which you can view right here, the ANC is indeed crumbling fast under international pressure. And if you haven't yet, please consider becoming a member of the Willem Petzer group. Your support is what helps this channel grow, reaching new heights and changing the hearts and minds of people. We can't do it without you guys funding us. Just follow the steps written down in this video underneath me. Goodbye and God bless.